Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be looking at the first commission piece of the channel, this Tiffany dial brown bezel Submariner homage. This piece was commissioned by Mr. Gomez of California. Just want to say thank you to him for supporting the watch building business and the channel. Getting started here, we have all the necessary components needed for the build. Starting off here with our stainless steel case and bracelet. Next is our brown ceramic bezel insert. Then we'll look at our sunburst dial and our Mercedes hands, both loomed with the BGW9. And last but not least is the movement. This time we're using an NH35. So to begin, we have to get the movement out of all this protective packaging. The protection's pretty good. It's in a couple different plastic bags, all within this plastic movement holder, to hopefully keep the movement safe from bumps and shocks. What I'm doing here is just winding the watch up. Gonna put about 50 to 60 turns in. That should fully wind the mainspring. Setting up the Timegrapher here, I have the display just off screen to hopefully give a better visual of me turning the knobs that regulate the movement. So out of the box, this movement was running plus 7 seconds a day at 279 degrees of amplitude, but it had a 1.5 millisecond beat error. So I'm doing my best to correct that. Here you'll see me adjusting what the technical guide describes as the stud support. This is what regulates your beat error. A lot of people will tell you not to touch this. I'm not exactly sure why. I've played with them on quite a few watches, and they all seem to keep pretty good time. So I had to cut out a good chunk of this video because I played with those two studs as much as I could, and the lowest I could get the beat error was 0.4, and I just decided that it would be more efficient if I just pulled a new movement from my stash and used that one instead. Getting the second movement into the movement holder while I was in the Timegrapher proved to be more difficult than I thought, but I eventually pulled it off. And once the movement was secured and regulated, I ended up with an average rate of plus 2.6 seconds per day, an average amplitude of 279.8 degrees, and an average beat error of 0.1 milliseconds. And now with the movement keeping pretty good time, we're free to start the build. I'm going to start by flipping over the movement and placing it back into the movement holder. And we'll get out our dial here in a second. Going to be taking a slightly different route with this dial. Usually I use my favorite black enamel parity dial. However, for this build, we're going to be using a light blue sunburst parity dial. And as always, I'm starting by placing the dial on the movement, seeing what dial feet need to be removed, and then simply clipping them off. You'd think after doing this so many times, I would already know which feet to clip off, but it's always good to be safe rather than sorry. So as I filed the little extra bits of metal on the dial, let's talk about the origins of this build. In late March, Rolex was expected to announce their 2023 lineup of watches at Watches and Wonders. Many people expected them to announce a 70th anniversary version of the Submariner model. Images and articles began to speculate that it would be a full platinum case with an ice blue dial and either a light blue or a brown bezel insert, looking very similar to what Rolex did for the Daytona on its 50th anniversary. Well, Watches and Wonders came, and though we did get a lot of new models and updates to other models, a platinum Submariner was not on the docket. However, I was still fond of the idea, and I really like the contrast between the light blue dial and the brown bezel. So when Mr. Gomez reached out, looking to commission a piece with the blue dial, I wasted no time sending him the concept images and asking his opinion. He thought the concept images looked great and loved the idea of a parity dial on it, and soon after I was sourcing parts for the commission. Getting back to the build now, I have those little metal tabs filed down flat with the rest of the dial, I've lined up the dial feet into those little holes in the movement spacer, and with just a gentle press down, the dial is set into the movement. Going to break out the air blower here and just clean off the dial of any specks or debris that may be on it. We have our handset here. Again, I'm using the Mercedes style silver polished handset. These and the dial are loomed with BGW9 Super Luminova. Looks like the hour and minute hand are fighting gravity, so just going to give them a couple taps here to release them. Now with the watch pretty much fully wound, I'm going to pull the crown stem all the way out to the third position, start winding it till we get to midnight, and that date flicks over. And with this movement being a non-GMT, we're going to start by setting the hour hand. Again, using my plastic tweezers and being very careful as to not scratch the dial. Just going to get the hole in the hands lined up with the center pinion, and then adjust the hand so that it's sitting right at midnight. If the hand moves or pops off the pinion, there's no need to get upset, no need to rush. Calm down, try again. Looks like I've got it lined up where I want it. Gonna break out the hand setting tool and gently press it down to give it a test fit. See what it looks like when we wind the hands all the way around, and if it flicks over right at midnight. Looks like we're flicking over right at midnight, so I'm going to get the hand setting tool back out, press the hand down firmly to make sure it's set. Just double checking here, want to make sure the pressure of setting the hands hasn't affected when the date changes over. Looks like we're still right on time, so it's time to start setting the minute hand. I'm not sure why, but the minute hand always seems to be the hardest hand for me to set. Most people will say it's a second hand because the pinion it sits on is so small, but lining up the minute hand for me has always been a struggle. And just when you think you got it, it pops off and you gotta start all over again. Luckily it didn't look too misaligned. Quick fix, and I can get the hand setting tool back out and go for round 2. So with the minute hand now gently attached, I'm just going to rotate the hands all the way around, making sure they don't make contact with each other. And then as we approach 12 o'clock, we'll see how close I got with the date function. We can see the date wheel is starting to rotate, and it pops over right now. About a minute before midnight. Pretty good. So just like the hour hand, I'm going to get the hand setting tool back out, press down firmly on the minute hand, and set it in place. Here you'll see me tilting the movement up. I'm just looking to see how parallel the hour and minute hand are to each other. Just another way of checking for clearance. So with the minute hand now attached and our date flicking over around midnight, it's time to move on to the seconds hand. As per usual, I'm just going to use a small piece of Rodico, stick that to the end of the seconds hand, and then do my best to line up the hole in the hand with the pinion it sits on. Lining up this hand can be a bit of a struggle with the overhead camera in the way. Doing it enough, you kind of get a feel of when the hand is sitting over the pinion. The biggest thing is not to force anything, as bending your seconds hand or your seconds pinion would bring a pretty quick end to your build. So I've made another amateur videographer mistake and let the memory card get full, thus the camera stopped recording. Just know in that break, I was able to set the seconds hand. So with all the work complete on the dial side, we can now move on to getting the movement into the case. First step is pushing down on that lever and pulling out the crown stem on the back of the movement. Here we have the case in question. Unfortunately, it is not a platinum case like the theorized Submariner concept was. Just using a stainless steel case here. Slightly different from the cases I've used before. Comes in a little bit thinner, so it should sit nicer on the wrist. Unlike the previous cases, this one does come with a plastic movement holder just to help the movement stay in place once the case is fully put together. As always, I'm going to clean the inside of the crystal just to make sure that there's no dirt, debris, or specks in there when the movement is placed inside. Looks like there was some more stubborn specks in there, so just using some Rodico to force those out. And with the crystal nice and clean, just going to take the movement and place it in the back of the case. Then with the screwdriver's help, pressing down on the movement spacer ring to get the movement into place. Using the screwdriver to line up the movement so that the crown stem goes right through the case into the movement correctly. And here, just removing the crown for the next step. Here is the crown stem that comes with the movement. I'm going to place the crown onto it and thread it on tight. I like to grip it with plastic tweezers just to make sure I get it nice and tight. And with the crown now attached to the crown stem, we can take that assembly, place it through the case and into the movement. Placing these calipers on the back of the crown and the edge of the case will give us the amount that needs to be removed from the crown stem. Sometimes the caliper will give weird readings on the amount of millimeters needed to be removed. I simply just go by what the jaws show, make a little mark with a Sharpie, and then use that to cut off the appropriate amount. And with a nice strong pair of cutters, I'm going to place them just above that mark I made and snip off the extra. Here I'm using the Dremel to shave off a little bit extra from the crown stem, as well as coning it off to make getting the crown on a little bit easier. So here is simply screwing the crown back onto the crown stem, and hopefully we've cut off the proper amount so that we can get it on the threads but still have a good amount of pop when we unscrew it. So inserting the crown stem now, twisting ever so slightly, being careful not to force anything and ruin the keyless works inside of the movement. And with the crown stem now in the movement, I can push slightly in on the crown and screw it onto the threads and make sure it makes it all the way to the edge of the case. I'm going to go ahead and put the plastic movement holder back inside of the case. Sometimes these are needed, sometimes they're not. All they really do is just hold the dial up against the rehaut to make sure there's no space between the two. And with that in place, I can put the case back on the case and begin screwing it down. Going to use the rubber ball to get it started and get the initial turns in, and then I'll get out my Caseback tightening tool and get the final turn in. Recently, I've been doing these minimal tightening adjustments just to make sure that that tightening tool doesn't fly out of my hands and scratch the case. With the case back firmly secure and tightened down, I can now look towards installing the bezel insert. As I mentioned before, I'm going to be using a brown ceramic bezel insert for this build. Brown isn't often thought of as an attractive color. However, when it's paired with this ice blue dial, the contrast really works out. Some eagle-eyed viewers will notice that I didn't have to take apart the whole bezel construction to get that click filed down to turn the unidirectional bezel into a bidirectional bezel. With this being a dive watch, I'm going to leave the unidirectional bezel alone, so in the case that it is used to time a dive, it is impossible to accidentally spin the bezel the wrong way, giving the user a false reading on how much air he or she has remaining. So using a pair of metal pliers, I'm going to remove the covering for the adhesive strip. So with the adhesive now exposed, I'm going to take the bezel insert and place it in, lining it up dead on midnight. Looking at it from a few different angles here before giving it the final press into place. Making sure the bezel makes contact with all the adhesive behind it to ensure a tight fit. And then rotating the bezel just to make sure it's working as it should. Using a cloth here to clean up the high polished areas of the bracelet, making sure to remove any fingerprints or oil that are on it. Awkwardly cleaning the other side because I didn't want to use my left hand for some reason. With the bracelet now clean, all that's left to do is get it back together, lining up the two links here, getting a screw, and threading it back into place. This case shipped to me with this blue ink or covering on the crown. Not really sure what it is. I've seen it a couple times before. Usually I just use some nail polish remover on a Q-tip, gently rub it onto there, and it breaks up whatever it is, and it's easy to take off. Just using a dry end of a Q-tip to remove any leftover nail polish. Don't want it sitting on there for too long, even though I'm sure it will evaporate. And now breaking out another cloth and cleaning up the bracelet a little bit more on the flanks and on the brush finish. And with that last bit of cleaning up, the build's complete. I want to first thank Mr. Gomez for trusting me to build this commission for him. With his help, I was able to bring what was a Rolex concept image to life, and I'm very happy with the way it came out. At first I was a little skeptical of the brown bezel, but the way it pairs with that light blue dial and the stainless steel case really brings everything together. Putting it on wrist here, you can really see that sunburst blue dial is going to grab some attention from across the room. All in all, I'm extremely happy with the way this build turned out, and I'm happy to see the concept image brought to life. Again, thank you to Mr. Gomez for making this happen. If you're looking to commission a piece yourself, go ahead and send me an email at goldenstatewatchshop@gmail.com. Feel free to subscribe to the channel and follow me on Instagram. As always, I'm going to end with some shots of the watch in natural sunlight. Thanks for watching.